Kaltre Oitesula Uniprte. Hello and welcome to part 2 of this NATVI course. Today we will speak about simple sentences and also about the subject and direct object endings L and T. What exactly it means we will talk about later. You can watch this part without having any prior knowledge. You don't need to know any NATVI grammar and you also don't really need part 1. First, let's look at some English simple sentences and how they would translate into NATVI. When looking at these, please try to find some differences between the English and the NATVI, specifically in the grammar. Here are some English sentences, and here's how they would translate. I run would become oe dul or dul oe. Both is possible. Oe means I, and dul is the verb to run. He runs then becomes po dul or dul po. Po can also mean she. It is gender neutral. The NATVI have actually pronouns for he and she specifically, but they most often prefer the gender neutral po. The dog runs. Nantang tiep dul or dul nantang tiep. A cat runs. Balukan tiep dul or dul balukan tiep. Yesterday I ran. Dram oi dul or oe dram dul. Or basically any other order. You can really use any order here, it doesn't matter. And tomorrow I will run. Dul drei oe. Oe dul drei. And so on. Again, the order doesn't matter at all. Please stop the video at this point and think for a minute. Which differences can you spot? Write them down before you go on with the video. So, which differences did you find? I have a list for you about the ones that I find important here. First, there is flexible word order. For the sentences we had, actually the word order was completely free. Oe dul, dul oe. It doesn't matter. It both translates to I run. For those simple sentences, you can really always put those words in any order you like. I write flexible word order instead of free word order because there are some rules in NATVI about where to place your words. But as long as there is no rule specifically about how to do it, then you can do it however you want. There are no conjugations. So oe dul, I run, the verb is the same as in po dul, he or she runs. In English, we add an s here because it's the third person singular. In some other languages, like Italian for example, we have even more complicated conjugations with different forms for every person. In NATVI, the verb doesn't change according to the subject, so the person who is running in this case. The verb can change according to other things, but this is no matter for today. There are no articles. We had palukan tiep dul, and it can mean both, the or a cat runs. NATVI has no the or a or an or anything like that, which makes a lot of things easier because in some languages we have this really complicated article system with different genders and everything that doesn't exist in NATVI. But of course, a bit of meaning can get lost because the cat runs means something slightly different from a cat runs. But most often, context helps us. In such example sentences, of course, where there is no context surrounding it, we can only guess what it means, and both translations then would be fine. And last, tense doesn't have to be indicated at the verb. What do I mean with this? In English, I have I run and yesterday I ran, so it's different, the verb changes. In NATVI, that doesn't have to happen. You can conjugate the verb according to tense, but you can also leave it out if context makes it already clear. In this sentence, we have dram, which means yesterday. Because of this word, it's already clear that it happened in the past, so I don't need a past conjugation on the verb. Like I said, NATVI has changes for the verb according to tense and also other things, But for the beginning, can be very easy because you can just put another word into a sentence that makes clear which time you're talking about, and then you don't need to bother with verb changes. Of course, later on, you also want to learn how to change a verb. But for the beginning, this can be really, really good. So, these differences cause one big problem. Look at the sentence Neytiri hears Ninat. Can you think about a problem that this might cause if you translate it into Na'vi due to the rules you just learned? Take some time to look at it and think about it. So, only word order tells us in the sentence who hears and who is heard. If I would change the word order in that English sentence to Ninat hears Neytiri, the meaning is suddenly something completely else. I mean, if Neytiri hears Ninat or Ninat hears Neytiri, it's completely different. Na'vi now has flexible word orders, so we need another solution for this. And for that, we have case endings. There are two, in the sentence Neytiri hears Ninat, there are two different roles for the noun. First, we have the subject, who verb. So in this case, who is hearing, who hears someone or something else. In general, who is performing the action. And we have a direct object, who is verbed. In this case, who is heard. Ninat is heard, so she would be the direct object in this case. And we have two different endings for these two different things. The subject in Na'vi is indicated with an L ending, and the direct object is indicated with a T ending. Sounds easy? It is kind of simple, but it gets slightly more complicated. The L ending can change depending on after which sound it comes in the word. If this word ends in a vowel, it's just an L. If it is after a consonant, a double L or a double R, or after a diphthong, these are these double sounds like ow, I, a, ew, then it is il. This is just to make it pronounceable, because if I wanted to put just an L behind a word that ends with a consonant, it would be very weird. The direct object has a few more forms, but when you look at the table, you will see that you can just always put a T there. T is always correct. After a vowel, it can also just be a simple T, but you can also put T. After a consonant and the pseudo vowel, so the double L or double R, you can put both T or eat. And after a diphthong, you can generally put T and eat. And after I and A, you can also put a simple T, a T. So let's look at the sentence we had before. Neytiri hears Ninat. Like I said, Neytiri is the subject here. She's the one hearing someone else. So she gets the L ending. And we also know that Ninat is the one who is being heard. So she gets the T ending. We get the Na'vi sentence Neytiril staum Ninatit. Staum means to hear. So, but because what we learned about free word order or flexible word order, we can also use all other word orders. Neytiril Ninatit staum, Ninatit staum Neytiril, Ninatit Neytiril staum, and so on. All these sentences mean exactly the same, and they are all correct. Let's look at some more examples. Again, English, and what becomes a Na'vi. I eat the fruit. I am the one eating, so oi, I becomes well. Eating or to eat is yom, and the fruit is the thing that is eaten. So it's a direct object, so it becomes mautiti. The insect follows me. Nong he angil weti. The dog chases the cat. Nantang tsiepil, fewi, palulukan tsiepit. You see him. Poti ngal tsea. Tomorrow we will find it. Run au ngal drei zat. The hunter hunts the jerig. Daron jerigit daron jul. I didn't translate all the words for you now. In case you don't know these words yet, here's a small exercise for you. Stop the video And just by looking at the case endings and which word has which case ending and which word has no case ending, try to find out yourself which Na'vi word corresponds to which English word. Afterwards, check with the dictionary. But the general learning here is you always have to look at the case endings to find out what a sentence means or which role a noun plays in a sentence. Don't look at the word order. The word order will not really help you here. Now that we talked about L and T, we also have to talk about verb transitivity. That sounds like a very fancy, bit scary linguistic term, and maybe it is, but let's break down what it actually is. In dictionaries, each verb is categorized as either vin or VTR. I have some pictures here from different dictionaries. So first was Reikonu, we have Fueo again in Discord, we have the Entei dictionary, we have Reikonu in Discord, and we have Dictionary. And you see, I marked it on every picture. They are all the verbs you see here are categorized. They either have a VTR or VEN. But what the hell does it mean? So, VTR means transitive verb. So it stands for verb transitive. And that means, yeah, that the verb is transitive. This means it can have a direct object. This is exactly what we just talked about. For example, in the sentence, Neytiri hears Ninat. Ninat is the direct object because she is heard. In the sentence, the insect follows me. The me or I am the direct object because who is followed? I am followed. So these are the direct objects, the things that are verbed, basically. And because they can have a direct object, they can use an L and T endings. But they can also be used as intransitive verbs. This is really important. L and T case endings are only for transitive verbs. You never use them with intransitive verbs. But look at the sentence, I eat, oe yom. Eat, yom, is a transitive verb in Na'vi. But in this sentence, I don't use L ending. You would maybe first think that you need the L ending because I eat and I am the one eating, so I need the L ending. But the L ending is only used if there's also a direct object. What is eaten? We don't know. There is no direct object in the sentence. And because of this, we also don't want a L ending here, as the L ending is only used if there is a T, so a direct object. Here's the counterexample. I eat the fruit. What is eaten? The fruit is eaten. Therefore, the sentence is transitive. And because the sentence is transitive, we need L and T ending. And we can use them because yom also is a transitive verb. Well, mautiti yom. So even though yom is a transitive verb, it can be used in both intransitive sentences, so sentences without a direct object, I eat, but also, of course, in transitive sentences, I eat the fruit, where we have a direct object, in this case the fruit. So even though it's important to know which verbs are transitive and intransitive, and L and T can be used with transitive verbs, it's also important to know if the sentence where the verb is used in is then transitive or intransitive. So if there is a direct object in the sentence or not. Like you probably could already guess, wien then means intransitive verb, so verb intransitive. These are the opposite of the transitive verbs. So they cannot have a direct object, and they therefore can never use LNT endings. This again is very important. We talked about that transitive verbs can always also be used as intransitive. This doesn't work the other way around. If a verb in the dictionary is there as intransitive, then you can never use it with LNT. Sometimes this will look very strange. There are verbs in Na'vi that translate to verbs in English that seem transitive. For example, nume, to learn. In English, to learn is clearly transitive. I learn the language. There is a direct object, the language. But in Na'vi, this doesn't work. Nume in Na'vi is an intransitive verb, so we cannot use LNT. We will learn in other lessons how to deal with this. So, they can, however, use other endings if it makes sense. L and T are not the only case endings, So you will learn more case endings later on. Some tip for studying: all C verbs are intransitive. C verbs are a class of verbs that always end with a C. For example, we have irayosi, to thank, kaltesi, to greet, larosi, to clean. So all these verbs that end with a C are intransitive, always. A lot of them look like they're transitive. I mean, I clean the house, I greet you, I thank him. That all sounds like there is a direct object. In NAPI, there is not. So you will have to use other endings or other things to indicate who is the one greeting and who is the one who's being greeted. But like I said, we will talk about this in another video. So, what are the key points of this lesson? First, NAPI has flexible word order, verbs don't get conjugated, and there are no articles. So these are basically the base differences between NAPI and English if we look at simple sentences. Second, case endings are used to mark the role a noun plays in a sentence. So for example, who is doing something and who is something done to. Subject and direct object. These are the ones we learned today, but there are a few more. L marks the subject and T marks the direct object. Note, however, that L and T of course are only the simplifications. Go back to the point with the slide with the overview to see all the forms they can have. Only transitive verbs can use these two case endings. If you have an intransitive verb, you cannot use L and T. You will need other things that you will learn later on. Transitivity of a verb needs to be learned. So you need to look up in a dictionary if a word is transitive or intransitive. Very often, the answer is very logical. I hear you. There is a direct object, so it's transitive. But sometimes, like with nume, to learn, where there is no direct object in NATVI, so it's intransitive in NATVI, are different from English. So it makes always sense to look it up in the dictionary. And lastly, a small tip for studying verbs: all C verbs are intransitive. This was it for today, for this lesson. Do you have any questions? If yes, you can leave them in the comments or contact me on Discord. I hope you learned something and had some fun. Hi, Yellowvi!